There are rooms the government keeps so quiet that even the walls sound like they're holding their breath. Behind one of those doors, men and women were asked to do something impossible: to look across continents and describe what they could not see. They called it remote viewing. The program that collected it all had a name that could have come from science fiction: Stargate. Tonight, we will step inside Stargate, into a world of blindfolded spies, sealed envelopes, midnight coordinates, and strangers who insisted they could describe foreign bunkers, lost hostages, and secret weapons, without ever leaving the room.
It begins in the 1970s, when whispers traveled faster than satellites. Reports said rival nations were quietly exploring the same thing: psychic spying. So the U.S. answered curiosity with money and method. Scientists, military officers, and a handful of unusual recruits gathered at research centers and military compounds. They tested people who claimed to sense the unseen. They refined a ritual, a near-clinical sequence of prompts and sketches meant to funnel the mind toward a target, a set of coordinates, a photograph, a name. A remote viewing session looked deceptively simple. The viewer sat in a quiet room. A monitor handed the viewer a single clue, a series of numbers, a map coordinate, sometimes nothing at all. The viewer closed their eyes and described the images, textures, and feelings that came to mind. Those descriptions were transcribed, dated, and sealed. Later, independent adjudicators compared the notes to the target. The protocols were meant to cut out guesswork. No leading questions, no coaching, no feedback that could train the mind. And yet, some sessions produced descriptions that stopped scientists in their tracks. There are stories that read like campfire legends dressed in government stationery. A viewer sketches a turbine beside a long straight road, mentions a rust-colored curved wall, and analysts point to photographs of a secret facility that match, almost exactly, details the viewer could not have known. Another session, late at night, produced a map of a compound beside a river, with "Tall White Tower" scrawled in the margin. Months later, a satellite image placed a structure there, the kind of hit that made skeptics frown and recruiters lean forward. These moments were the oxygen of the program. For every dramatic hit, there were dozens of misses. But the hits kept hope alive, and hope is persuasive in a room where stakes feel existential. Stargate was not a room of loners. It was a network: experimenters, military analysts, contractors who wrote the scripts, and a small band of remote viewers who became legend, names that would follow the project long after it ended. Some were artists who painted what they saw in their minds. Some were seasoned soldiers who described places with the blunt clarity of a tactician. They kept strange hours and shared strange scars. The social cost of being labeled psychic inside a culture that prized the measurable. The program lived at the crossroads of science and superstition. Laboratories hummed beside meditation tapes. Data sheets filled with coordinates sat next to sketches that looked like pages torn from a dream journal. Debate was constant and often ugly. To some scientists, the methods were a curiosity. Interesting, maybe, but hardly reliable. To others, the occasional success could spell strategic advantage, and to the military, any edge was tempting. That tension between statistical rigor and operational urgency became the project's defining friction. But there is a moment that tilts this story from the uncanny
toward the profoundly human. A session that the project's keepers would later call ambiguous. A session that cracked confidence open and forced hard questions. It is the moment when belief and evidence collided.
As years passed, the program accumulated archives, taped sessions, sketches, transcripts, scores of experiments. Outside the sealed rooms, a quieter process began. Evaluation. Independent reviewers were asked to examine the work, to weigh hits against misses, to decide if the program had delivered anything an analyst could actually use. The verdict was not a ghost story. It was paperwork. It said, in blunt, bureaucratic language, that despite some striking cases, the results were inconsistent and not dependable enough for serious intelligence operations. Funding dries up when outcomes can't be repeated. New leadership asked new questions. Did a dozen dramatic successes justify 20 years of uncertain returns? Could the military base its life and death decisions on impressions and sketches? In time, the seals came off certain files. The program's name moved from the classified ledger into public records. Where once there was rumor, there was now paper, transcripts, slide decks, and evaluations. Yet the story did not end with a government memo. Stargate slipped into the culture like a rumor with legs. It became a book, a documentary, and then a film, its outlines exaggerated and its mysteries enlarged. Veterans of the project kept telling their tales, sometimes of uncanny insights, sometimes of ordinary human failing. For conspiracy enthusiasts, the files were proof of hidden truths. For scientists, they were a catalog of experimental failure and methodological peril. For storytellers, they were irresistible, a program that dared to test the impossible. Now, decades later, you can read some of the session transcripts. You can sit with the same words the viewers spoke, the textures they noted, the metaphors they used. You can feel the strange intimacy of a person trying to name the unnamed. And you can decide for yourself where the line falls between skill and accident, between method and wish. Imagine the simple fact of a sealed envelope on a desk, stamped with coordinates. Imagine the hush as a viewer leans forward and whispers, "I see pipes. I see a red roof. A man holding something that looks like an engine." The world beyond the room keeps turning, while inside, someone claims to have touched a place that time and distance had hidden. Stargate was, in the end, a human experiment. It tested what we hoped the mind could do, and tested the patience of a system that needed certainty. It left behind paper and debate, and a rumor that will not die, that sometimes, in the best silence, people see more than they should. If anything feels certain about Stargate, it is this. For a time, the United States spent real money asking a very old question. Can the mind reach farther than the eye? The answer remains, like many answers in the dark, open to interpretation. What would you have seen if you were sitting in that room?